we'll get started here. We do have a quorum, so we'll proceed. My name is Mike Russell. I'm the Public Works Director for Columbia County, also the chair of the 911 Advisory Committee. And so we'll go down the room here and introduce each other. I'll call your name. If you could just do a quick introduction. Mike Fletcher.
Yes, sir. Here, Director, Columbia 911.
Chief Greenway.
Ryan Greenway, Chief of St. Helens Police Department.
Nancy.
Nancy Edwards, CFO, Columbia 911.
Chris Carey.
Chris Carey, Columbia County Emergency Management.
Earl Smith.
Earl Smith, Vernonia Fire.
Joe Krasinski.
Joe Kaczynski, Miss Birkenfeld Fire Chief.
Jeff Pritchard.
Jeff Pritchard, Scappoose Fire District.
Lara.
Hi, Lara Marzulli, Operations Manager for Columbia 911.
Mary Jo.
Mary Jo Beck, Office Support Specialist.
Malcolm.
Malcolm Hyatt, Oregon Department of Forestry.
Ryan.
Ryan Murphy, Columbia County Sheriff's Office.
And Tyler.
Tyler Miller, Scappoose City Council.
I believe that's everybody. If I missed your name, please introduce yourself.
Nathan Hughes, Columbia 911.
Oh, hi Nathan, sorry. Anybody else I missed? Thank you all for being here. Any additions to the agenda?
No, sir.
Not hearing any. All right, we need to approve the minutes of the July 27th, 2021 meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes unless there are changes, and in that case, let's make those first. I read them. I didn't see anything that I saw that needed to be edited.
I'll move to accept the minutes. This is Jeff Pritchard.
We have a second.
Second, Chris Carey.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes of the July 27th, 2021 Quarterly Advisory Committee meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none. Any opposed to adopting the minutes as submitted? Hearing none, we'll adopt them as submitted. Thank you. Appointment of committee members and alternates. I know last time we talked about the board reappointing members whose terms had expired. Did you have specific updates on that, Mike?
I do, sir. The only change and update is last month the Board of Directors appointed Sean Davis, Scappoose Police Chief, for the representation for the City of Scappoose. In conversation with Chief Davis, he's appointing Justin Stevenson as his alternate. We'll make those changes, we'll note those, and then officially make that happen Thursday at the board meeting.
Great, thanks. Any questions about that from the committee? Okay, hearing none. District updates, operations report. Laura.
So we currently have 2 trainees and we have 4 applicants in the background process. So we do have an upcoming lead promotional process that we're going to start, and we also will have a position open for the program coordinator position. So we're going to run a recruitment for that as well. So this last month we began contract negotiations, which I'm not gonna lie, kind of feels like we just finished, but it is what it is. Time flies when you're having fun. And then the other thing we're doing is we're just prepping for our in-staff training next month.
Okay. Any questions for Laura? All right, hearing none. Equipment and technological briefing, Nathan?
So we received our rebate for the lighting project of $9,412. We've moved CAD over to the SD-WAN network. So we are now running on 4 internet connections and load balancing between all of them. This will increase our bandwidth and speed. We recently hired a new GIS specialist, Danelle Hooper, and we are working with ODOT to get live camera feeds into dispatch for the dispatchers.
Yeah, I usually just go on tripcheck.com and I'll look at those, and that's all I get. So are these new camera installations or just those?
Just those. There was a couple other solutions that they offered, but we wanted to go with a live feed, so we're working.
Yeah, and I encourage any of the agencies listening that if you do have the ability to switch to LED lighting or whatever and take advantage of the Columbia River PUD incentive program, it's well worth it, and great way to save money on your utility bills and get that rebate too to help pay for it. So yeah, it's a good deal. Any questions for Nathan?
Looks like Jeff has one.
Yeah, I reached out to Nathan a couple weeks ago with a question about AVL, and I'm curious to know, Nathan, if you've been successful with any information from our CAD vendor about automatic vehicle locators that are third party that can interface with our CAD system. And for the rest of the group, the question was posed for those areas where we don't have cell service and we want to keep track of resources. That's how you do it. But.
Yeah, so I did receive an answer. It's not an answer that anybody would like. The quote they came back with was a minimum of $33,000. So I've been trying to figure out what else we could possibly do. I'm signed up for their API class in January. But right now I was just collecting all the information I could before I reached back out to you. So it wasn't sticker shock.
Copy, and just to make sure I understand for the group, the only way we can integrate AVL into our CAD system, aside from using MDTs, is to spend $33,000.
No, there are some other solutions. So tape over UDP, which is provided by some of Jetpacks. Cradle Point's one that comes to mind. I know that one's expensive, but I think some of the Verizon ones can also do it. It's just figuring out what works with all the different vendors.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still field ops via iPads is still an option.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. Director's report, Mike.
Yes, sir. So on the agenda here you have radio system updates. There's no new update on the Dixie Mountain. We're still working with both FAA, MNI, and Day Wireless, providing the feds drawings and specs on all the equipment. This is round 3 of doing this. Radio site improvements. There's nothing to speak of Green, Klatskanai, other than I can say that all of our winter prep has been completed at all of our sites, so that means everything's been fueled and we're ready to go for the next power outage. The Meisner site, though, is so we're contingent on our construction up there. We're receiving a tower and a shelter from the Washington County, Clackamas, and Newburgh radio system upgrade, so we're getting their surplus. That project keeps getting pushed back on the calendar, so the most recent information that we have is potentially January. Equipment will be released, but that's tentative, that everything goes according to plan, which so far it hasn't. So we're adjusting accordingly. The front end documents for the civil work are now complete. Our construction manager and the district's legal counsel finished up those documents, and the construction manager is just waiting for the right time to publish those RFPs, those requests. I didn't want to be too early and let it sit stagnant, so that's to be determined. Columbia Heights lease is complete. We've completed that document with Day Wireless. It's not optimal because it's still tremendously expensive. We're paying about, we agreed to pay $24,000 per year. We had a back rent due of $12,000 that's been taken care of. And basically what we're buying for that lease is we want a short-term lease agreement. Day Wireless is interested in a long-term, 5, 10, 20 years. We're not interested in that because we know that we're going to be doing a new radio project, and that site may or may not be utilized by us. So we basically are paying extra to have a 1-year term, and that will be up in April, and then we'll go month to month. That gives us a lot of flexibility to move quickly if we want to or need to. Looking through my notes here. COVID update, we're doing everything remote currently. The facility is for the most part shut down. We have vendors that do come in for emergency work or mandatory maintenance upgrades and preventative maintenance, and so that's really all we're doing, allowing in the building. Tow service contracts, there's no update on that. That's in the hands of the county. And the ASA, our work with them, we're just a participant and we're just waiting for the next meeting, which those meetings have been postponed from public health on a regular basis. The Corey Hill site, if you recall, we were broken into. Most of that repair work has been completed, but not all of it. Again, this is a national thing. Supply chain issues is what we keep being told, but the generator has been complete, and we're working on some final things with Day Wireless. But in my conversation with them just last week, we check in weekly. They expect to have that completed very soon. Keeping our insurance agent and claims adjuster up to date on the costs that we're accumulating there. So all those costs that we are front end loading will get reimbursed as soon as the claim is closed out. The main thing to bring you all up to date is at the last board meeting here last month, Federal Engineering presented their findings and their report to the board. They went through a process. For most of you were present for this, but they gave their final recommendation. The content of their statement of work is complete. They successfully provided all their deliverables, and they presented their recommendation to the board. At the conclusion of that meeting and presentation, the board did not take any action. but the board is interested in reconvening the radio work group, the stakeholders, and federal engineering to do a work group. Just a single day, or at least a 1 day, single focus. That's all they want to talk about is their report. Federal engineering is more than willing to, and in fact interested, because they want to see this project through completion. My ask of the advisory board here is to help us and help the board focus what that work group meeting should encompass. In talking to federal, they made some recommendations to help move the process forward. It's their recommendation to focus this work group meeting onto 1 or 2 topics. They believe that based on their experience, that free-for-all talking about anything and everything will just exacerbate the problem, and we won't get to a solution. We'll be just having meeting after meeting. So what their recommendation is a more in-depth focus on any one of several topics. So their solution that they recommended was for the Columbia 911 to partner with the CRESA 800 Core. So a potential topic is to just do a deep dive into that conversation about the CRESA, the pros and the cons, the upside, the downsides, just a deep focus on that CRESA solution. Another option is to focus on perhaps the 2 top solutions offered. CRESA was one. You might want to look at the CRESA solution versus the Washington County Clackamas Newburgh solution. You might want to focus on 2 other options, the Tate 700 or the Codan VHF. The other option is to, of course, the board has the pleasure to wipe the table clean and just say start over and let's do an RFP. That could be a topic of conversation. So the point is, federal engineering is asking the board to provide them direction on what it is that they would like to focus on. So the advisory committee, that's what you're here for, to advise staff and to advise the board on your pleasure. So that's what I'm seeking for today, is what kind of input could you provide me that I could take to the board?
So in order to kind of help facilitate the discussion, I asked that the slides from Federal's presentation to the board about the various options, if you could share your screen and put those up, we can start talking about what our recommendation might be. So the question to the committee is which alternative of the 4, as Mike said, the Federal's recommendation was alternative 3, to partner with CRESA on their already developed system, and that's a 800 megahertz radio solution, and start focusing more on that option, alternative. So just going to open the floor up for discussion to the committee. What's your feelings about each of the alternatives, and are you comfortable with moving forward with Federal's recommendation with alternative 3?
I don't know a lot about these alternatives. This is Malcolm speaking. My main concern with alternative 3 or 4 is the lack of ownership and control, and what that would mean to the agencies that are paying for that service. And my only experience, I haven't had any experience with CRESA, so I don't know how they work. I've had some experience with WACA, and I just know that periodically they decided to do something, and they were very expensive, some things, and they just decided to do that and then build their constituents to make that happen. And I don't know, I can't say how much input their constituents had into some of those decisions, but my concern was that it wasn't a whole lot. So I don't know how much input, you know, the folks that use 911 here in Columbia County would have if Cresa decided to, you know, do a major upgrade and push those costs out, and how that would affect the various users. But I don't know the details of any of these alternatives, and so that's just my first thought.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid concern. I don't know how Cresa works either. You know, maybe a condition of our membership is that we get a seat, a vote on the board, whatever governing board they have or something. I don't know, that could be an option. So, yeah, I agree. The other thing, you know, I think with any of these options, we're looking at probably subscriber fees annually. So you're going to be, will probably, before maintenance and ongoing operations, we're going to be paying, you know, be an added fee to our budget to pay for the radio system and its maintenance going forward. You know, what's the magnitude of that for each of the options? I don't know. So I think that's part of why Mike, or Federal actually, is asking us to narrow our focus a little so we can start getting into those details and work that out and see, you know, maybe Cresa is not the right option for us, and we don't know that until we get some more details. So I appreciate the comment, Malcolm. Anybody else have any input?
Yes, sir. This is Jeff Pritchard, Scappoose Fire. At this time, I don't want to say the Scappoose Fire District has a favorite, but when we look at the alternatives that are on the screen here, we see apples, oranges, a potato, and maybe an onion. It's really hard to differentiate between these systems when we look at features, interoperability, and everything else. I on behalf of the fire district, one of the things that we probably should consider as a group is the money side of things. Money side of this. How much do we really think our taxpayers are going to be willing to pay for a radio system, number one, and then number two, based on the size of the cost of the radio system, how much can we as users absorb when we know we're all going to have to do our own asks to the community at some point or another within the next 10, 15 years. And I think that's a significant thing to consider, because there's school bonds that are out there, there's a jail bond that's out there. At some point, our community is going to say, enough's enough. Now, communication is the single most important part of everything that we as users of this system have as our backbone to do the jobs that we do for the public. So it's a very challenging balancing act, but it's one that we really haven't talked much about. And again, when we look at the comparisons, they're all over the place. And then I think the last, I guess, little bit of insight that the fire district would like to impart to the rest of the users is echoing what ODF just brought up. And we have a significant concern with joining another entity in another state that we have no control over, and what may occur in another state. So the Cresa one, you know, while it may potentially reduce costs, there's that. With WACA, I think what was already said about WACA rings true. So I think if we're looking at going down the road of a 700 or an 800 system, we strongly need to consider doing something on our own and not joining somebody else. And again, it comes back to cost. What can we afford? what is a reasonable expense, and I think we need to look at those components as we're trying to guide the board and work together as a group of users when we make our recommendation. That's all I have for now.
So Mike, I think Federal kind of touched on if we were to go on our own with a 700 or 800 megahertz option, that the pricing, the estimated cost down below it would add, I can't remember exactly what they said, if it would double that cost or at least $10 million or something. They did talk about that, didn't they?
They did touch on it. So the main advantage, well, there's two primary advantages to partnering with an existing 800 core. One is just the price of the core. If we do a standalone, which is certainly an option, the cost would be higher because we would be buying infrastructure, the main core, which is the brain of the system. By partnering, we save ourselves at least $2 million because that's basically what those cores cost. So you would just tack that on. The other issue that we will struggle with owning and operating is just as today, we do not have technical expertise in maintaining our own radio system. So today, we contract to a third-party vendor to maintain our system. 800 systems, 700 systems are highly complex, and they take a fleet of people to maintain them. So either we would have to staff up with experts, technicians, or we do what we're doing today, which is contracting with a third-party vendor to maintain the systems. The other thing to consider, regardless of what spectrum, is if we own and operate our system, we have logistic space problems today. We have to own and operate and maintain our current system that we have, our VHF system. And if we were going to purchase a new whatever system, VHF or 7 or 800, it has to be built, but while at the same time we have to maintain our current system. So we don't have any physical space to build a new system within our facilities. That's not to say that we couldn't expand or even find some remote location to build out that core, the SEEB, whatever it's going to be. Those are just things that logistically the board and the users need to be aware of. But, I'm making notes of everything, what everybody's having to say, because this is all excellent points that I'm happy to share with the board as you are.
So Mike, this is Brian Greenwood from St. Helens.
Yes, sir.
I concur that couple challenges. One, VHF is challenging. I think that just from speaking as a representative of St. Helens, something we would not like to transition to. Going to a system that's already proven with a partner, I think, is the best route. I understand the concerns, but I also understand it's half the cost. To Jeff Pritchard's point, this county struggles with bonds and levies as it is, and none of us want to pay more taxes. However, public safety comes at a price. I'm not saying that, I'm the only writing a check for this, but I think transitioning to a 7 or 800 is best, but going with their shared option, just for those reasons you pointed out, it's too expensive on the front end to get your own system up and running and then have ownership of it. And if it goes down, you're responsible for it. Whereas going in a partnership, I think, would be best. Again, just speaking from having a position on the board from St. Helens. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Chief. Anybody else want to chime in? It kind of sounds like we're not ready to give a solid recommendation yet.
Hey, Mike, I've got a question for 911. Fully acknowledging the fact that I do not have a dog in this fight as far as deployable radio units, but just one question. I believe I recall from the technical brief from Federal Engineering, was the 700 system potentially upgradable to an 800 system at a later date, so we could potentially do that, get there incrementally?
So the 700 system, so the real only difference, so it's a different spectrum, but 7 and 800 are basically the same type of system. The difference was in the Tate presentation, what they were initially offering was an analog system, so not P25, not digital. But to that point, yes, those can be upgraded incrementally. In fact, that was part of the Com Northwest Tate presentation, was to build out that system. It was kind of a buffet type proposal that they presented to the district, and so it could start out as analog and be upgraded to P25. And then just from experience, one of the challenges that I have learned, painfully sometimes, is best intentions. Let's start off with something, the base model, and then we will incrementally upgrade systems. And what historically has happened, not just in radio systems, but lots of different technology systems, is fatigue. Fatigue sets in both fiscally and operationally for system upgrades. And eventually, what historically has shown, those systems become stagnant just based on fatigue. That would be a fear that I would have if we did that approach.
Anybody else have any input, questions, ideas?
Yeah, this is Jeff Pritchard. I think the biggest fear I have right now is with partnering with another system that's larger than us and not taking our needs into consideration. And as an agency, we are experiencing some of that right now in working with other outside agencies, and it's kind of ridiculous. So I'm very cautious about how we approach this. And if the group does decide that this is what we need to do, I'll jump on board with the group as long as there is checks and balances in place so that our county's needs are not just heard, but they're dealt with. And I can't stress that enough. And I'll just leave it at that.
If I could jump in there, Chief. So those are all valid concerns. Those are real. And if the board and you as advisory group are recommending or promoting a partnership with any entity, it could be Portland, it could be the WACA system or CRESA, it doesn't make any difference. The next steps that the district would undertake is two parts. Would be contract negotiations with the host agency. Again, fill in the blank: Portland, ODOT, OSP, CRESA, WACA, it doesn't make any difference. And that's where those conversations would take place and agreements would be hashed out. CRESA, WACA, Portland isn't building the system. That would be back onto the radio manufacturer. And in all of those cases, it's Motorola. So the district would then also enter into contract negotiations with Motorola. And that is where the system design takes place. That's where concerns about radio coverages and performances take place with the manufacturer. So two distinct things and two different targets of interest that you all have: control, expectations, mile markers, and then performance of the system, coverage, and just overall performance. So those things can be addressed.
Mr. Russell, go ahead, Malcolm.
I was just going to say, ODF is a minor player in this, so I'm not going to, I can abstain from voting to get a recommendation from this group, and that's fine. I just agree with what Jeff was saying, and I don't want to waste your time and money. But if alternative 3 is maybe being leaned towards as a preferred alternative, maybe we do go ahead and proceed with potential contract negotiations, and then we pause and come back for discussion with these groups. And maybe we can't get to a place where we feel like we have adequate control and checks and balances, and then it's just a done deal. But if we can get to that point, then maybe it's easier to talk about it.
And that's absolutely doable. And that would be my expectation anyway. The district isn't going to go into any of this process in a vacuum. You are our stakeholders, you're our advisory committee, and it's going to be a partnership through this whole thing, regardless of what system we land on. Your point of, I just lost it there, I may be having a stroke. Negotiations, yes. Part of the, just reminding everybody, part of that recommendation, why Cresa over anything else, the points were interop that the 800 systems give you, because you are the ones that are interacting with our neighbors, our shoulder agencies. A huge part of their consideration was the fact that we don't have a hospital in this county. So every single transport leaves the county, and the overwhelming majority of the transports go into either Washington County or Multnomah County. And an 800 system, regardless of whose it is, allows the best option for interop for our responders. 700 can, it certainly can. There is ISSI links that can be built. Currently, there are not those built for the Tate system in the area, so that's just another thing that we would have, a hurdle we'd have to get over. Those ISSI links are not inexpensive. That's part of the reason why that budgetary number is what it is for the 700, because they're about $1 million a pop, and we would need multiple. So that's a consideration. The other difference that Cresa gave Columbia 911 was just simply they had more tower sites that benefited Columbia County than the WACA system did. They both border us, and they both have towers that give advantages to Columbia. It's just that Cresa had actually more. Regardless, we would still be building out our towers, regardless of which site, WACA or Cresa, that we'd go to. We'd be building out our own sites that we would own and operate. And we utilize those cores. Yes, Chief.
So, two questions. One is for the group. I'd be curious to hear what Chief Kaczynski and Mr. Murphy from the Sheriff's Department have to say. I think as we move forward, we need to make sure that we're doing this as a team. Regardless of our respective profession, this does need to be a collaborative approach, and I feel more more information from our law enforcement partners would be beneficial, because I certainly don't know what their needs are. And if I'm going to make an educated decision for our district, it would be nice to have some of their needs and considerations taken into account. And then the second question, why wasn't any of this, the alternatives or system comparisons, why didn't anybody look at the BOEC system?
That's a fair question, Jeff. And I think, well, there's a couple things. The statement of work for federal engineering was, there was a laser focus. It was to review our system as it is today, and that was just a confirmation of what we have, where our stuff is for federal engineering to use as a baseline. Their second thing was to review the RFI that the district published just prior to me arriving here. So they wanted to validate what that was, and then they reviewed the submissions to that RFI. So if you recall, we had 5 total submissions. 3 of them were qualified as system providers, and that was the Motorola, the Tate, and the Codan. So that was their focus. Rather than reinventing the wheel, look at what was proposed to us and then do a compare and contrast of those 4 options provided by 3 vendors. So we didn't ask them to open up and look at every option. We're trying to be efficient with this process. We already went through an RFI. We got qualified bidders that offered real solutions. Motorola didn't suggest Portland, and part of that reason is multiple, but they have the fewest towers that impact Columbia County. They do have some, but not compared to the CRESA system or the WACA system. Also, the reality of working with the city of Portland is cumbersome, and that's with all technology. That's through many years of experience for the metro area. But that's it in a nutshell. I think it's important to note that the 2 out of the 3 proposed vendors offer their fleet of technology is wide. I mean, Motorola could sell us a VHS system. They could sell us our own standalone 800 system, but this is per their words, they looked at what they thought professionally was in our best interest. And they're looking for today and the next 20 years of needs for the county. And having our own standalone 800 system, they didn't feel was cost effective when we can partner with a proven technology and proven performance by our neighbors. It's cost sharing. And then Tate offers VHF equipment. The only vendor that did offer VHF was Codan, but keep in mind that's all they sell. So a board member at the last meeting made a valid statement. If you as a company can sell VHF at 8 million, but you also sell an 800 system at let's just say 21 million, which would you rather sell? The 21 million. Yeah, if you're looking at just raw numbers, I can understand that, but I think what all of those vendors are looking at Columbia County for today and looking for the next 20 years.
Thanks for that answer. And not to take away from the first question I asked about some of our other agency partners.
Yep.
One other follow up for you, Mike, on this is, you know, when I think back on when the initial proposals were done, you know, Tate, Codan, all those, I mean, what are we, like 5-6 years now?
Well, it may feel like that, honestly, but they were published, that RFI was published in, I want to say December of 17, and all the gnashing of teeth, that was one of the first things that I did in early spring, early part of summer of 18, is when we started doing those meet and greets and presentations by the vendors at the library and then here at the district office. So that was spring and summer of 18.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just hoping that that information is still current. I mean, with technology the way it is, I know everybody likes to make fun of me because I'm the drone guy, but technology changes fast.
Very quick.
So hopefully it's still good current information. But thank you for answering the question.
Absolutely.
Anything from any other folks? Any discussion? What's your timeline, Mike, on the workshop with the board?
Well, it's open right now, so the board of directors meets this Thursday afternoon, 1 o'clock. Come on down, join us on TV here. I'm hoping that the board will give me some direction. I would prefer to get some kind of a distinct answer for what FE can do, because what we're going to do is, regardless of what we provide them, we have to go back to federal engineering and ask for a quote for this meeting. Travel, whether it's going to be in person or not, this whole COVID thing is a pain, and it changes from day to day. So is it going to be in person, which costs extra because airfare and all those things, or is it going to be remote? Me personally, I would prefer to do it in person because I think there's a lot of value in that. But the main thing is if we can get some questions that the board, that you, the users, want answered, and that will help federal engineering draft a presentation for you and have all their ducks in a row for us. So the short answer, Mike, is there is no timeline. We just don't want this project to grind to a halt.
Yeah. Well, for my 2 cents, I'm thinking we have to move to a 700, 800 system, P25 compliant system. It's just that's just going to provide some future proofing of whatever system we go with. So that's my recommendation. Now, whether it's Cresa or WACA or our own, I guess, I'm really interested in what the committee wants to, or the advisory committee wants to, which direction they want to go. I've seen it work well, I guess, in my experience, where a group like Cresa, and I don't have any experience with them specifically, but just in other situations where they have the resources and infrastructure and ability to provide a service, and we buy into that service and use it. Yes, there is risk. Absolutely, there's risk, and I don't think that's going to be mitigated completely, whatever we do. Even if we own our own, there's risk. And as you said, Mike, getting onboarding expertise, whether that's through a contract or internally, to maintain the system and do upgrades as needed and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's going to be ongoing risk with any alternative. So I'm okay with alternative 3 as suggested by federal, as long as we have the ability to weigh in. There's some milestones, and we have the ability to weigh in, get reports from you about the things you've heard today, concerns you've heard today, and how those are being addressed or mitigated. The rest of the committee feel that way, or are we not ready to give that recommendation? We want some more time to think about it. I understand the value to Mike to be able to go to the board and say here's the recommendation from your advisory committee. I understand that the power of that, the help that gives him before the board. But if we're not ready, we're not ready. But anyway.
Agreed.
Joe,
So,
what do you
Mr.
hear?
Russell, real quick, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Fire Defense Board, but I know the Fire Defense Board posed a bunch of questions to Mike, and we're still waiting for some of those questions to be answered. We kind of received some information that sort of leads us towards, we're working on getting you those answers, but those answers were never really obtained. If there has to be a decision right now as a result of this meeting, I can't support anything. And I'll go back to my opening statement. We've got apples, oranges, a lemon and an onion. They're all different, and I don't know how any of us could make an accurate comparison or choose one of these options when you look at the features, the interoperability, those weren't truly vetted. I would like to hold off on actually pursuing a recommendation, but if we have to have one today, let me know and I'll give you my recommendation.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say we have to have one today. That's not what I'm saying. But I've only heard from a couple of you, and I'm not hearing from the rest, so I'm trying to help Mike as much as possible move forward. Even if it's just comments, here's what the committee discussed, that will be valuable for Mike to take forward. So yeah, no, I'm not saying we have to have and make a recommendation today. Chief Kozinski.
Yes, thank you. Actually, Chief Pritchard kind of expresses a little bit of what I was thinking also, that I personally am not quite ready to make an actual decision. I know we did have some other questions out there. I know this is dragging on, and I would like to see it an end point to it. I was going to throw out there, also there's other end users that really haven't been very vocal yet. So I was wondering about if we actually did pick a date, an end date. Hey, everybody, every end user organization, please give me a recommendation by such and such date, provided that we have all our questions answered. And hopefully the questions don't keep going on and on. Does that make any sense?
Yep.
And I will echo that, Chief. And I just want to reiterate, if you all had a recommendation for option 1 through 4, I don't care. That'd be fantastic. What I really need, though, is what I heard from everyone is you have questions. You want to know more information. And that's absolutely what I want to give, and that's what Federal Engineering wants to give you. They're seeking guidance on to focus the conversation, because to Chief Pritchard's point, you do have apples and oranges and onions here. So what Federal is saying, it is in our best interest to focus them to what do you want to focus on of those 4 options to help answer. And what I'm hearing, and I may be wrong, but I hear a preponderance towards a 7 and 800 system. Okay, that helps me, because maybe we could go back to, if the board agrees to this, let's have them come back and talk about 7 800. Okay, and those are 3 different options right there. 2 spectrums, really they're the same, it's okay. 700 is the Tate proposal. What does that give us? Compare, contrast to the 800. And we could even have the conversation about the CRESA system versus the WACA system, or a standalone if you, the users, prefer to have the district own their own 800 system. It's an 800 system, so let's talk about that. What's the features? What's the functionality? You're going to get basically the same features and functions in a P25, 7, or 800 system. But that's a valuable conversation to have. And that's something I could tell Federal, that's what we want to focus on. The WACA versus CRESA versus the 700. Same basic spectrum, same basic features and functions. What's the good points and the bad points? Maybe that's a solution, a suggestion. Don't want to put words in your mouth.
I think that summarizes our discussion today.
Well, I might ask too, Mike, are there any of these systems that nobody is interested in pursuing? Like I think when Mike did all the touches with all the different agencies, except for my agency, I don't think anybody else was interested in VHF. So maybe we can all agree that that one comes off the board and it's not going to be, any more time put into. If there's enough angst with the way WACA has done things in the past, maybe the group agrees that no, we're not going to consider anything with WACA, and then you're down to 2. I don't know if that's another way of getting at it rather than making a recommendation, but being able to say without a doubt, no, this is definitely something we don't want to consider.
Good point.
Chief Pritchard.
Yeah, I think for the Scappoose Fire District, we're not ready to say that the 700 system is the one for us, or the VHF. We don't have enough information to truly make that decision yet. When it comes to the total cost of a radio system and what we could absorb as a community, what the county could absorb, I think there's too many questions out there that were posed by the Fire Defense Board chief. That we were hoping to make a decision, again, I can't speak for the other districts, but I'm not going to vote on one particular solution at this point in time.
Yeah.
This is Dean with Vernonia. A lot of the points that were going through my head have already been mentioned, and a lot of the things when we talk here within the district about the process is we've got to look at the upfront cost versus the tail end cost, or down the road, and then for us and MIST, when it comes down to the coverage, we always think back when you're talking cell phone coverage and radio coverage and percentages. Well, the percentage of the people versus the percentage of the mileage of acres and things like that, we just haven't had enough concrete evidence to point anywhere. We've got some pluses and minuses both in the VHF, and we have some 800 stuff in our rigs, so we can talk with Washington County, and there are some places where we can hear Washington County better than we can hear VHF, but then there are other places that it's the opposite. So we've got so much contradicting information that it's hard for us to make a decision at this point as well.
All valid stuff. I want to touch on a couple things because Dean, you made some valid points, interesting points. So cost, I want to reiterate, 700-800 systems, terribly expensive. And the district recognizes that if we the district, decided to go 700 or 800, that none of our partners, Vernonia, Mist, St. Helens, doesn't matter. The cost of you supplying yourself with the subscriber radios, both mobile and portable, would be crushing. And that's why it's incumbent upon us to purchase those for you. So the bond measure would cover your subscriber radios, it would cover your annual subscriber fees and your annual maintenance. And again, we put a number on it, and then the number is for a 10-year period. It's arbitrary because we have to tie it to something, because when we go for a general obligation bond, those are also tied to a time frame. And so there's different, it's just like financing your car, your home. You know, you can buy a 30-year mortgage, you can buy a 15, you can buy a 5. Geo bonds work the same way. And so you throw a dart at the wall and say, let's just see what a 10-year bond is going to cost the taxpayer. But the bottom of that slide, you see 4 different prices. And we specifically asked Federal Engineering to give us a rough estimate, conservative, i.e. worst case scenario, budgetary number, so we can start our homework with SDAO to start working on the groundwork for a bond. The numbers that we were originally given in the RFI were science fiction. It's just like car shopping. You know, they lowball you to get you in. And what we can do today to get you to sign the papers. Radio vendors work very similar. And so the numbers we got, I can tell you that looking at option 1, the VHF, that initial budgetary number was 2.9 million. But we went to FE and said, tell us a realistic number. And it's still not all inclusive, but we wanted worst case. And so there it is, 8.5. Well, and we did that with the 700 and 800 system too. And that's just to help us go to SDAO and start the legwork so we can get a tax rate. Because I don't know what it is going to be either, but you got to start somewhere. So, and then the other point, Chief, is coverage. Yep. Concern, valid concern, if we're looking at 95% coverage with the portable at the hip across the county, there's a valid concern that, well, geez, you know, your area is not going to be as populated as the Highway 30 corridor. Valid concern. So how we would do that is we would break up the county into zones. So let's just say you're zone 1 and St. Helens is zone 6. Those zones can have their own performance standards and they can be matched. So it's 95% in zone 1. It's also 95% in zone 6. So we're not going to disparate and have you lose out because you're in a small pocket of population. We're not doing that.
Okay. Well, and that's appreciative, and I think that was one of the things that was brought up in the Fire Defense Board meeting.
Yep.
But another thing was not just the initial cost for the 10 years, you know, that's incorporated in the bond. Is there any idea as to what the districts are going to look at after that 10 or 15, whatever that PIN number is?
Yep.
What do we have to look for in budgeting to have the amount of funds to continue to PM and subscriber fees and all that stuff?
Exactly, and that's all part of that contract negotiations with whomever, whatever we come up with. So, and hopefully by just throwing that dart at the wall and say 10 years, that gives all of us 10 years to plan. Budgetarily, you know, operationally, because we don't know what's going to be the future, but we can, you know, it's a little fuzzy. But that's part of that rationale behind throwing a number. We got to start somewhere.
Okay, so we won't know any idea about what we could possibly look at after that time period until we get into the negotiation portion of it?
I think that's being realistic, and I really appreciate Malcolm's suggestion is, you go into these negotiations and you start crunching numbers and making your request and negotiating what the terms are, and it may not work out. Okay, and then we go to plan B. But to answer the questions the Fire Defense Board had, Federal Engineering is going to be the expert on answering those questions. I'm not an expert. I'm not an RF engineer or a structural engineer, and your questions are valid, but we need to focus on, are we going to talk about apples or are we going to talk about onions?
I'm curious to hear what Mr. Murphy has to say.
What would you like to know? So unfortunately, I wasn't at the last meeting and didn't see the presentation, but based on what I'm hearing today and what I know from the past, I'm leaning strongly against or away from the VHF systems and into either the 7 or 800. Our interest is coverage and then communication with our partnering agencies like Cowlitz County, Clatsop County, Multnomah, and Washington County. So I would be more, I'm leaning towards, like a 2 or 3, but I want to see what the differences would be.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. So we're about 10 after. Mike, do you think you have enough from this discussion? I think it should be maybe a standing item on the agenda as we continue to talk and as more information becomes available and it becomes clearer.
Well, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing what I'm hearing, I guess, consensus. So y'all have questions, and it seems to me that you're most interested, or at least the majority of you are looking really towards the 7-800 system. I don't hear a lot of, and I'm not discounting you, Malcolm, because actually ODF out here is a very good, unusual player in a fire response plan for the county. It is actually very nice, and so we really did consider you in whatever system we go to. And so part of our, whether we went to a 7 or 800 system, it's going to be dual band radios because we're not leaving you behind. But what I'm hearing as the group consensus is you're more leaning towards a 7-800 system, which does help me, and that's what I'm going to relay to the board. And I would invite you all to attend the board meeting this Thursday at 1 p.m. If you'd like. I will be certainly speaking on your behalf, but it's always good to have it directly from you as well. And I can go forward and ask Federal Engineering to give a focused work group meeting focusing on those two bands, 7 and 800. And I'm sure they would answer questions about VHF.
That sounds reasonable. That sounds consistent with what I heard today.
Something I can work with, boss.
Okay, let's do roundtable real quick. This is an opportunity for each committee member to just give an info share, any policy issues or operational issues you might want to bring up to the district. So I'll just go down the list again. Chief Greenway, you're first.
I have nothing. Thank you, Mike.
Chris Carey.
Hey, real quick, already presented it to the Fire Defense Board, but it looks like the public alert and warning policy that I put in front of the county board is going to be adopted. That's largely weather related, because that's really how my department's going to be interacting with the rest of the county. I am more than happy to have me or someone in my department sit down and help individual fire agencies or police agencies hammer out their own alert and warning policies and template messages, so that when you're calling Mike in the middle of the night saying, hey, I need a number 1 message in Vernonia, it's like you're pointing at a Denny's placemat rather than starting from scratch, which makes life a heck of a lot easier. Beyond that, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, by the way. Daniel Hooper, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I've been an employee of the district for about 16 years. I'm just new to the GIS role. I'm the new GIS specialist that replaced Cindy, who retired back in August. And I'm just sitting in on meetings to get my feel around the admin side of things.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Screen name Earl Smith.
I'm with Vernonia. I don't have anything to add at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Chief Pritchard?
Not much to report other than we're about to purchase close to $100,000 worth of radio equipment to upgrade our fleet of radios that were originally purchased in 1990 something. We're beyond due. But outside of that, continuing to work with DCOM on a couple of challenges on our borders.
Chief Kozinski?
I've got nothing further, thanks.
Malcolm?
So this week, Karen Simonton is retiring from our agency. She has been the front receptionist here at this office for 28 plus years. We have done interviews, and we have a new hire that should start Monday next week. So that's our big change.
Thanks, Malcolm. Chief Deputy Murphy?
I don't have anything to add. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I don't have anything to add either. We're gearing up for winter operations already. It's just the fall, but we're into the season. So as far as roads go, we're getting into storm mode, sharpening our chainsaws and getting snowplows ready to go. If you haven't heard, we're in a La Nina weather pattern. It's our second year, and predictions are colder and wetter than average. So we do expect some snow, hopefully not much ice, but we're getting ready for it. That's all I had. So any announcements, Mike?
Just a reminder, our next meeting for the advisory committee will be held January 25th. Same bat channel, same bat time.
And can you remind us when the board meeting is?
It's this Thursday. It's at 1 p.m.
If you'd like an invite, you can shoot me an email.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all. We'll adjourn. Thanks for your time today, and appreciate the discussion.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.